Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon with David Greenwood, who will be taking us through ways to improve student results using the Essential Maths series. My name is Kim Keane and I'm the Education Manager for Queensland. Before I make a start, Cambridge would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered and pay our respects to their elders, both past and in the present. Please also know that this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed by email following the event. There'll also be time at the end for any questions, and I'll let you know when you can begin to prepare to put those in. You'll see a little box at the bottom where you can type any questions, and you can, if something comes to mind now, you can begin to place them in there, but we'll take a look at those throughout the webinar and then respond to them at the end. So I'd like to introduce David. David is the Head of Maths at Trinity Grammar School in Melbourne and has more than 25 years experience teaching maths for the years 7 through to 12. He's the lead author on our Cambridge Essential Maths series and has written more than 40 titles, and we're very fortunate to have David on our team at Cambridge. So please welcome David Greenwood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim, and welcome everyone. I can see there's lots of people from WA this evening, or this afternoon, I should say, and people from all over the place as well, so that's great. As Kim said, this is an information session about making the most of the Cambridge resources for improved student results, and at the centre of this presentation, we will of course be looking at the two series from Cambridge, namely the Essential Maths 7 to 10, so Essential Maths, which I'll call Essential, and also the Essential Maths Core, which I will call Core for the evening. You'll see from this presentation that while the Essential series operates at a slightly higher level than the Core, the two series have many common elements, and I hope to make that clear as I progress through the presentation. So to guide my presentation, I have a series of questions, and the first one is, in a general sense, what are the essential and the core resources? And you can see from this poster, there's a range of series. The bottom 8 are the Australian curriculum versions. The 4 there with the bright colours, blue, green, red and yellow, the Australian Curriculum Essential, and below that the Core. And then also the other ones for the Victorian curriculum. So eight books, Victorian and Australian curriculum. Now, what is common to the Core and Essential? Because both series have been written in the same way. Now, they're not the same books with just very minor changes, but there's many things that do overlap and many structural elements which are the same. Now, both cover all the content descriptors of the Australian curriculum, and this is very important to note. Both contain differentiated learning pathways via section classifications and work programs. And all the latest types of resources, both print and digital, are included in both series. Things like progress quizzes, digital workspaces, modelling tasks, and so on and so forth. These are all in both series, Essential and Core. Perhaps unique to Core, though, is that there is more time spent reviewing key content before moving on, and a much gentler gradient in terms of the greater difficulty of the questions. Now, all the matching assessment tools also have been written to be realistic in terms of student accessibility to a lower level series, as is the Core. The things like the enrichment tasks have also been rewritten for the Core so that there's a realistic level of enrichment for a whole range of students. Unique to Essential is perhaps a more compact review of earlier or key content. There's a much wider range of problems stretching through the 4 proficiency strands, and a more significant enrichment opportunity and extension sections leading to 10A, including 10A and then leading to perhaps math methods pathways in year 11 and 12. My next more general question is, how can we use these resources to help us differentiate the learning experience without losing control of the lesson structure? And what I mean by that is that you may wish to offer highly differentiated learning experience, but with the lesson content directed by you as the teacher without having students diverging off onto random content pathways. So to do this, we split our differentiation up into 3 levels. The first major level of differentiation is, of course, which series you're going to use, the higher level series essential or the core series. And this is a fairly significant decision for students in terms of their differentiation. And while there is a significant level of overlap between the content of essential and core, there's also a significant difference in the way material is presented and the difficulty within the examples, the assessment and the exercises. And this, I hope, will become clearer throughout this presentation. The second level of differentiation that's available in both series is the classification of the sections, the lessons, if you like, where they are classified as consolidating, standard, and extension. So this will allow teachers to choose from the series that they're using which sections they would like to use and how much extension they would like to include in their course outline. The third level is, once you're in a lesson, then which work program you're going to choose. And we offer 2 work programs for the core and 3 work programs for essential. And I'll definitely make this clear as I run through the interactive and the PDF versions of the text in a moment. With regard to the second level of differentiation, that is the section classifications, you can see by these 2 examples, that's Year 9 Essential, Chapter 6, and Year 10 Core, Chapter 4. You can see in the Essential Chapter 6 that one of the sections is classified as consolidating, and that's because all the content there reviews important content from the Australian curriculum from Year 7 and 8 before they get into the Year 9 content descriptors covering the index laws. And at the end of that chapter, you can see there's an introduction into fractional indices and surds, which technically is not really covered properly until Year 10, but an introduction here felt appropriate for the authors to include some of these sections, but these are called extending, so that gives teachers a choice as to how much they would like to cover. In the core example, you can see there's a review of probability, which is titled Consolidating. Now, there are no extending sections marked in the core series, actually, because there are no sections that go beyond that level of the Australian curriculum, and the core does not include the 10A content descriptors. But there are a couple of sections which the authors have labelled as a gold star, where we feel that these are more challenging sections in the content of that level. For example, conditional probability and independent events, which is in the Year 10 standard Australian or Victorian curriculum. At the third level of differentiation, we have these tabs, and I've just snipped these out of one particular exercise, 5F for Year 8 Essential and Year 7 Core. And you can see the different choices of questions. So if you're using the higher level series, you can still choose an easier or more accessible set of questions. That's a higher dose of fluency and the easier problem solving and reasoning. Whereas at the other end of the scale, the more advanced students would get a smaller dose, if you like, of fluency questions. You can see a third of 2 to 5 is chosen, and the harder or more challenging problem solving, reasoning, and also the enrichment questions is included. In a similar vein, the core series is set up into 2 tabs. Now, these tabs are quite useful for planning your course, and these are in fact collated. One of the resources on the teacher website is documents like this, where we collate all these work programs into Word documents for teachers to adjust for their work programs. My next question is, how might I use both essential and core in the one school? And I know many teachers and schools do this. And to help answer this, I'm going to list 3 common scenarios. The first one being that perhaps the majority of the students or the classes in the school would use essential, opening up a range of pathways, including the higher level pathways at year 11 and 12. And perhaps with selected students with the core being used. The second option might be that core and essential are used on a class-by-class basis if schools are streaming or setting classes in that way. So perhaps, if there were 3 year 9 classes, 6 year 9 classes, 3 might use essential and 3 might use core. Perhaps the third option is the majority are using core because the school believes that the majority of the students would be heading, say, to a more general level of mathematics at year 11. And there might be, say, an advanced class with the essential, and those students might have the option of going on with something like math methods. Of course, there's a high level of flexibility with the Cambridge series because the mapping between core and essential is very close, chapter by chapter, for years 7, 8 and 9, but not with year 10, because year 10 essential includes all the year 10A material and the chapters are not aligned. But by the time we get to year 10, of course, we are clearer about where we're heading in terms of year 11, and so the choice is perhaps easier at year 10 to make. One of the documents that's on the teacher site for the Cambridge series is something that looks like this, and this is a document that helps to explain how the year 7, 8 and 9 core and essential are mapped together. So on the left we have essential, on the right we have core. The dots indicate some suggested pathways or course outlines, but you can see that 8F in essential does not have a corresponding section in core, and that's because it's an extending section. Okay, so when students get to 8G in essential, the core students should be doing 8F, so they're covering the same type of content in that lesson. And this document would be critical if any school wishes to run both texts in the one class. Now that may not happen very often, but there may be a situation where 4 or 5 students might use core instead of essential in that class, and this document allows that to happen. My next question is, how do I map the Cambridge resources to the curriculum? Okay, so there's a number of ways that we've tried to collate the content descriptors and the elaborations and so on to make this job easier. Now, of course, in the text itself, the Australian curriculum or Victorian curriculum content descriptors are printed. And these are also in the interactive version as well, with a link moving off to the elaborations of the curriculum. There are documents like this on the teacher pages where there's clear links between the content descriptors, the strands, the substrands, and which sections of the series. Now, further to the content descriptors and the elaborations, one of the newest features, which has been in the Essential series for a couple of years now, but now in the new Core series as well. And this is our learning intentions, which are listed for every lesson. And these are perhaps the key ideas, the key skills, or the key objectives which we aim to cover in that particular lesson. There is perhaps a significant amount of evidence which suggests that it is important to be clear to students what the learning intentions or objectives are for the unit of work or the lesson. And the learning intentions or objectives tells the students what they should know, understand and be able to do by the end of the lesson. So this can help provide focus for a lesson. It can help unpack the curriculum content descriptors as well, and it can help to assess the level of achievement that we are aiming for. And so the language we've used is to know, to understand, and to be able to. These, of course, on the teacher side are all collated lesson by lesson. If teachers wanted to use these and add these to a Word document somewhere or add them to their curriculum statements, all these are collated on the system. Further to that, we also have something that's fairly new, and that is called the success criteria. And this is there in the text and on the interactive to help teachers and students decide as to whether or not we have in fact achieved the key learning intentions. With the success criteria are examples which are there to provide an idea to students as to the meaning of that particular criterion. The links to sections refer students to the right place if they believe they need to do a little bit more work in that area. My question 5 is, what are some of the selected elements of the Cambridge series that I think can have a direct impact on student learning? So first of all, the warm-up or diagnostic assessment. So the essential and the core now have 2 diagnostic quizzes before a chapter begins, really. One is a warm-up quiz, and this is designed to review key content knowledge before starting the chapter. This might include simple tasks that should have been mastered in previous years. The second one, the diagnostic test, is a test which a student can do to tell the teacher what they already know about the topic. And these 2 diagnostic tools come as a handout, a printable handout, but also on the interactive as an auto-marked quiz, which could be set by the teacher through the teacher manager pages. I've already mentioned the learning intentions, but these are there for essential and core. You can see for the core series where key words are very important, the key vocab is also included in the learning intentions. So any word that's bolded throughout the key ideas of that section, or any word that the authors felt was really important to that section, are listed in the key vocabulary. Now, examples are not new, and the videos are not new. There's a video for every example, but what is fairly new is our Now You Try, because many teachers were using our examples and videos, perhaps in a flipped learning model or at the start of a class. And now there is a Now You Try question, which is a very similar question to the example without the solution printed in front of them. So the video might be used, the example might be used, but there's another example to try that's very much the same. And those answers are available in the series as well. The progress quizzes are positioned about halfway through the chapter, and this is there to provide a level of formative assessment, allowing important feedback before students enter into a more summative assessment phase, perhaps at the end of the topic. This is printed into the text. It's formatted as a worksheet if teachers wish to use it that way, but it's also an auto-marked resource on the interactive as well. Now, one of the new features of the core series is a double-page investigation into an application of mathematics in a particular line of work, and we've called these Maths at Work. These are included in every chapter across the core series. In the Essential series, there's a double-page spread in a similar vein. It includes 3 application and problem-solving questions, carefully scaffolded, if you like, so that students can work through independently, but at the same time develop some experience in more complex applications of the mathematics in a given context. Very new to the Australian curriculum versions is our modelling task for both core and essential. And this is a problem in a given context with semi-guided tasks to introduce students to the idea of modelling in mathematics. But rather than throwing students into the deep end, the resources have been carefully scaffolded to include 3 elements. 1, a preliminary task to warm the students up to the mathematical ideas in the modelling task. Then the modelling task itself, which is then divided up into 4 areas: formulate, solve, evaluate and verify, and communicate, which are the 4 key elements of modelling. We've also added an extension question to those modelling tasks as well. Both series still include other investigations, the puzzles, games and challenges pages. I've already mentioned the success criteria. These are printed into the textbook as well. And most people are familiar with the summaries and mind maps in the series, as well as the chapter and semester reviews with both a short answer, multiple choice and extended response, of course, as well. One new feature that you might find useful is our new glossary for the core series. So we have bolded keywords throughout the introduction and the key ideas in each section. All those are in the key vocab in the learning intentions, but they're also now defined in the glossary as well. One of the things that you may like is the embedded Desmos buttons in the interactive, and I'm looking forward to showing you how that works, where there's a direct link to Desmos graphing calculator, Desmos geometry, for example, and I'll show you that soon. I'd like to say at this point that perhaps one of the most important things that your students should be doing is solving problems. After all, surely that's one of the key objectives of the subject, and it's what students have to do in their final years of schooling. And so ultimately, sets of well-constructed and well-graded problems is the key to improving student outcomes. And with that, I would say that unless students are communicating their thinking, their working and their solutions, then real progress is going to be limited. And this is why at Cambridge we put a lot of time and effort into making sure our exercises are of the highest quality. To help here, though, we can also be guided by the curriculum proficiency strands. And along with that, communication being another fundamental aspect of doing mathematics, which sits behind the other 4. So in the Cambridge series, each set of questions is attached to a curriculum proficiency strand, with understanding being the first one, making connections, building knowledge, and so on. These have been recently reviewed, actually, so that they relate very closely to the key ideas in the section. They make the right connections to previous year's content, and they're written in such a way that it provides flexibility for teachers to use them as part of the discussion rather than setting them as part of the exercise if they want to. The fluency questions have been carefully graded, with in the core series the examples being carefully positioned between those questions in the fluency section. The problem solving also graded, where the first question is not necessarily the hardest one. So all students have some access to problem solving, and the same thing for reasoning when they do some proving, justifying, explaining and so on. Both core and essential have enrichment opportunities at the right level. So core has the gold star questions and essential has a more challenging set of questions. Now at this point, I'd like to move off to some PDFs so I can show you how some of these resources actually look in the PDF or in the textbook. So here is chapter 4 from year 10. And you can see the section classifications are here. This example includes all the 10A sections because it's the year 10. If this was year 7 to 9, they would be extending sections, but in year 10, they're 10A, of course. The curriculum content descriptors are there. And all those features I mentioned, I'll just cover here. The learning intentions. I didn't talk too much about the introduction and the Let's Start activity, all the key ideas, but those features are still there. Here's the understanding questions, which are now designed so that it could be set as part of the exercise or part of the teacher discussion. Can students use a calculator? Can they choose the right ratio? And can they solve an equation with x in the numerator or denominator before they move on to their section? Examples, of course, with solutions and explanations, the videos for each examples, and there's the Now You Try that I mentioned earlier. In the examples, you can see we have calculator icons if we think calculator work is appropriate. You can see the 3 tabs here with Essential, where the left tab includes the easiest of the fluency questions and a selection of the others, whereas the right-hand tab does not include the easiest questions. It includes less of the parts as well and the more challenging fluency questions. And the same story goes for the problem solving tabs and the reasoning tabs. Note here with the enrichment section, only the right tab includes the enrichment question, offering that highest level of differentiation, if you like. Allow me to jump through to page 41, just to show you the progress quiz, positioned about halfway through the chapter. Remember, this is also presented on the teacher pages as a handout and an auto-marked digital version. Let's go to 48. Okay, I mentioned before the applications and problem solving pages in Essential. So you can see here 2 pages of extended response application questions, developing and applying the skills from that chapter. And these are positioned about 2/3 of the way through. You may wish to set these as a task for your students before, maybe a week before they do a test, which might include hopefully some extended response questions. Okay, I'll jump through to 72. Just to show you here, there are Ask Has pages available in Year 9 and Year 10. They're printed into the textbook for Year 10 for TI Inspire and ClassPad as well. Here are the modelling pages that I mentioned with the preliminary task, setting students up for that particular modelling task. The task itself, working through formulate, solve, evaluate and verify and communicate, and also the extension section as well. The other investigations, the problems and challenges, and all the other features I mentioned earlier. I'll just skip over to a core example and just show you a couple of the different features here. So here we have the section classifications. You can see reviewing Pythagoras's theorem here for Year 10 is consolidating and so on, and a couple of gold star sections. One of the warm-up quizzes. Here we are with the learning intentions. You can see the key vocabulary is also bolded in the key ideas. And you can see here one of the features of the core series is that wherever the authors felt that there may be a slight hiccup from a student or a question, then a hint has been provided just to help students get started with those questions. And that's true right throughout every exercise. One thing that's a little bit different with the core series is that the examples are positioned right before the most relevant question. And therefore there is less mathematics and less parts or components in each example. So you can see that there's much less content being presented in this section. There are problem solving and reasoning questions available, and they are more accessible to students though. There are, however, 2 tabs allowing for that more micro level of differentiation. There's also the enrichment question. Okay, what about digital? So a couple of things I would like to mention that's fairly new for the Cambridge series. One is digital workspaces. So for those teachers that still believe they would like students to be writing things down, and I hope that's all of you, but they would like to do this digitally now, then this is now possible with the digital workspaces on the interactive. There is a multitude of auto-marked cases. I've mentioned a few of those already, like the progress quizzes and the diagnostic tests, but there's the test generator and all those other things where there is an automatic level of marking, and all the teacher resources as well. So allow me to flip over to the interactive version that I hope is live. You can see there when you do log in for the first time, a couple of new videos come up, and this is a new video. I won't play it now, but if you have a moment at some point, have a watch of that video to see how the test generator works in the latest version for Cambridge. So you can see here I have all my Cambridge resources loaded. I'm currently in the Victorian 2nd edition, but I'm just going to show you how to jump over to a different series if you have more than one. This is the Australian curriculum, and let's change. I've got 7, 8, 9 and 10. Let's jump over to Year 10. So here we are, Year 10 with the digital series. I'll jump through to the introduction. You can see all the things that I've mentioned are all here. We have links to the elaborations, the content descriptors, and so on. The next page would be one of the prior knowledge diagnostic quizzes. You can see this is now the digital auto-marked version. So if a teacher is setting this for their students, then all these results would automatically go back to their teacher database. That's the prior knowledge pre-test, and the next one would be the diagnostic test for that topic. Just moving through to one of the sections, you can see here all the learning intentions, and what you might see in the textbook is also available here in the digital, with shortcut links to a couple of resources like the example videos or the widgets or the hot sheets from the resource package that's available. Let's jump to the exercise. And you can imagine students would be doing this all the time. Here's the digital workspaces I mentioned. Let's just make that one a little bit larger, where students could type their working or answers. They could upload images if they wanted to, photographs of something, but perhaps the most common thing to do would be to draw in here. And all that working is then saved on the server for teachers to look at later. Now, I mentioned the level of micro differentiation using the tabs. Now, these tabs in the interactive version are live. So if I was to choose, say, the Essential series, which I'm in, and the more advanced students in that series, I might want to do the right-hand column. You can see that the selection of problems is live and active, and you can see the ones that are selected for those students are the ones that are showing. If I had a student doing the left column, you can see they're not getting the enrichment question. Links to the work solutions, of course, and the answers and so on. The walkthroughs and the quizzes are still there. The quizzes have been recently upgraded, so there are 3 clear levels, an easy, medium and challenging quiz for each lesson. These are also auto-marked. The walkthroughs are interactive examples that students can play with. Notice up here we have the green buttons which link to the Desmos tools, the matrix, the scientific, the geometry and the graphing calculator. Let's type something in here. Add a couple of sliders, and very quickly you can see how Desmos could be used to investigate transformations for parabolas. So similarly, for the geometry tool, you may wish to do very simple construction like so, or you might wish to add some angles here. Let's investigate one of these circle theorems. Let's measure two angles just very quickly. There's one, and let's measure the obtuse angle here at the center and just demonstrate. You can see you can play with this type of feature to investigate using geometry tool. So that is the use of some of those things. Just jumping into the dashboard, you can see many of the things I've talked about. The PDFs are available. The test generator is in here, the dictionary, the task manager, so teachers can set tasks for their students electronically, managing your classes, all the other hot maths material. Let's go to teacher resources, and I'll just show you some of the things in here. The curriculum supporting documents, all the working programs, including those differentiated learning platforms are here. The collated learning intentions and the curriculum grids, for example, the work solutions, all the printable handouts, and answers to the various investigations and so on are all available here. All right, so I mentioned the digital workspaces, but when students are working, they can also provide a level of self-assessment, so they can let their teachers know how they're going with particular questions. So there are 4 levels that they can choose from red through to green, but they can also red flag a question. And so when a teacher rather jumps onto their report for their class, those red flags will come up, and that may direct the teacher in what they would like to cover in the next lesson or reflect upon from the previous lesson. So here's just an example of a summary of that self-assessment and the red flags. Now there's a lot of time that we probably could spend looking at all the digital resources, but perhaps if you do want to spend more time going through that with someone individually, then I would recommend perhaps to talk to your Cambridge rep or someone like Kim, who I think now will perhaps take over from me and help collate some of the questions that we might have that we'll be able to answer. Thank you, Kim.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, so this is a good point at which if you've got questions that you would like to type into the box, you can start doing that. And I'll move through just a couple of slides myself, and we'll come back to respond to those, just to give everyone a bit of time to put their questions in there. So David did a fantastic job, as always, of going through the material and really giving you some new ideas perhaps of how to use the series. Even for those people that have been using it for a long time, it's great to get a really good, deeply analytical view of all of the ways that you can use the product. But you're also able to reach out to one of your reps or a rep in your area, or myself, and we can come out and do a PD if you're fortunate to be in Queensland at the moment. Or, of course, we can do a Zoom meeting, which is how we're tending to do a lot of our PDs now. So that's a really good opportunity for you to make that happen. So just a few little things here on the interactive textbook. I've just listed the main points so that everyone can see, you know, really what the interactive textbook is about. But David did go into it in some real detail there. But the main points for the textbook itself, maybe the workspaces, so the students are able to write their responses inside those workspaces is a fantastic resource. The drill and practice, Scorcher, which is always lots of fun. You get to play off against each other in the class, or classes against each other in the school, or schools against each other. I'm from the Gold Coast, and most of the Gold Coast use the Essential Maths series, and they all have their little playoffs against each other using Scorcher, which is really great. Very healthy competition. As you might also know or not, there are videos for every worked example throughout the textbook. So it's a really valuable part of the resource that we really do sort of put a lot of attention into letting people know that it's there and available. The teacher resource package as well has a huge amount of material that literally you could spend hours going through. So just a few things, that student workspace where the students can write their responses in, you receive all of that information and can respond back. This is also reportable information, so you can really fantastic for parent-teacher interviews, so really going into detail about how their students are going, but also getting a really clear image of what's going on for specific students, or perhaps for whole classes as well. So if you wanted to get a nice detailed impression of the interactive side of things, please reach out to your rep. And if you don't know who your rep is, following the webinar, you will receive an email, and it's a feedback form really just to get all of your details so that you can go in the draw to win the Bose headphones worth $500, which is a really great prize. So definitely fill out the feedback form, but also on the feedback form is a tick box that you're able to tick if you want to be contacted by your local rep. So that could be for anything. It's not just if you're wishing to have PD, but if you just have some questions that you wanted to get some more information about, you're absolutely welcome to do that. So let's move on to any questions that have come through here. The one that I've got in front of me from Andrew: where can we look at student responses in the draw section of their online textbook?
That's a great question. So
yep, the writing one.
Yeah, so once the students have written all their solutions up, they need to access that server. And it's probably worth, I think, having a little bit of a session with the Cambridge rep, I think, to make sure that everyone knows how to do that. So a little bit of time one-on-one, I think, would be good to do that.
Yes, yes. And I think actually that most of you in the webinar are from WA. There's a few Queenslanders, I can see your names in there, but the majority are from WA. And so Nicole is your rep, but you can, of course, tick that box and make sure that you do that when you fill out your feedback form, and she can get in touch with you to give you some more information. Yeah. Just going to refresh this and see if there's any more questions come through. There's no more questions in there just yet, but I'll give you a couple more minutes. I won't rush through it, just in case there's anything comes to mind. But the most important thing, I think, from now is to make sure that you fill out the feedback form so that you can go in the draw, and then we know who you are as well. But be sure to indicate whether you would like to see a rep or not. It doesn't look like there's any more questions from anyone, so great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, David. And on behalf of everyone and Cambridge, as always, thank you very much for giving us your time and sharing all of your insights with everybody.
Very My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here.
And thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you.